Hello there, everybody, and welcome to the Talking City podcast, brought to you, of course, by the Manchester Evening News. My name is Dan Murphy. I'm back with us today. A very happy return is Mr. Simon Bajkowski. Si, how's it going? How was Germany?
Yeah, it's good, thank you. Germany was very, very wet. I think we were accused of taking the Manchester weather over there because it was properly grim. While I think it was very nice over here, but the City fans that were over there certainly enjoyed themselves and found a way to have a good time despite the weather, and a very, very good trip for the team and the players as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It might have been rainy in Germany, but it certainly was a sunny day for City. They didn't win in the Allianz Arena, coming away with a 1-1 draw, but they, of course, won an aggregate 4-1 and advancing to the Champions League semi-finals. It was another quite pulsating match between the two teams, and a bit of a different one from that first leg, which City did so well and won 3-0, of course. It was a bit more back to the walls for City this time around. Bayern, the atmosphere was incredible, actually. The game was like 3 minutes delayed. You were there. I'm sure you're going to tell me. The game was like 3 minutes delayed as the referee sorted out his microphones and whatnot. And the crowd, it just gave them just like time to just keep screaming Bayern. And it was incredible on the telly. So God knows what it was like inside the ground. And as understandably, Bayern came out guns blazing. They wanted to try and get back into it, and they had ample opportunity to do so. They were kind of eviscerating City at points, getting down them, especially down the flanks. We've not really seen City so almost frazzled and exposed and open than we have in that game. But they rode the luck. They defended really well when they needed to. Good saves from the goalkeeper. They managed to get their way through. They, even despite missing a penalty, they got that decisive goal. And in the end of the day, they've gone through. A two-leg performance, you couldn't ask for much more from City. Even if it was hard and it wasn't exactly the best performance in Germany, it was a performance that you need to win these sort of ties and to win this tournament.
Yeah, and do you know what? Let's talk about the atmosphere, because it was so good and it was such a surprise. I've been to a few games in Munich and never been that taken away with the atmosphere, and Bayern is such a huge club that you get, like at Barcelona, say you get like a lot of people, tourists coming in and getting tickets for games, and that never makes the atmosphere amazing. We spoke to Manu Akanji before the game, after the Leicester game, and we put it to him like it'll be some atmosphere, and he was like, not really. There's a lot of places in Germany that have better atmosphere, and obviously he's gonna say that because he's played at Dortmund, but having been. But it kind of added into the feeling that, like, well, at least the crowd won't be a factor. And then it's chucking it down and all the fans are walking in, and like it just felt damp and not very high energy. And then you go inside the stadium and it was incredible. And, having been at both the Dortmund and the Bayern games, like, obviously much more riding on the Bayern game, but what an atmosphere in Munich. And, I'm not sure if City will have been expecting that, because we all certainly weren't, and it can't fully influence things on the pitch, but it was another sort of example of Bayern throwing absolutely everything at City, from the first whistle, but even before the first whistle, like you say, with all the chanting and everything, City was sort of, it was like a we're not in Kansas anymore moment. That they knew that they were going to be put through the ringer, and it was a really, really uncomfortable night for them. And the City fans were great. The City fans were great in the top corner, as well. But Bayern really brought everything to the table and said, "Show us what you're made of," and City responded.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think an atmosphere should have everything to do with a game, but you only need to look at United's second collapse in as many weeks to Sevilla on Thursday night to see that it can have a big impact. That Sevilla stadium was just absolutely electric, and it clearly affected United in such an intense atmosphere. And the fact City weren't as rattled as that in a similar sort of atmosphere was really brilliant. Now, and this kind of reference may go over a lot of people's heads, so I apologise, but the way that the game was kind of delayed and the noise just built, it's like this crescendo. It was almost like a really good wrestling match when the wrestlers don't need to actually do anything to get an atmosphere. They just stare at each other. They have the big face off, and the crowd just goes wild. It was almost like that, and you could almost see in that moment before the game kicked off, like Guardiola was already calling players over, and we can't lip read or anything, but I imagine the message has been, simmer down, just stop blocking out, calm down, because it was really intimidating, and it easily could have kind of got in their own heads as that delay picked up, and as we've seen with Haaland's penalty later on, a delay can have an impact. But we got into the game, and it was as you say, Bayern came out guns blazing. Kingsley Coman was absolutely excellent. He gave Nathan Ake the hardest game he's had all year, I'd imagine. And Leroy Sané had some great chances. We've not seen City as open or as exposed, as I said. And it was almost like we saw a bit of the downside to the Stones in midfield transition, because he couldn't really do it. By the time he was in midfield, Bayern had already won the ball back and was running forward, and Stones couldn't get back into the middle of defence, and City were stretched and exposed. So we did see a little bit of the downside to that, and maybe that's something to consider ahead of Madrid, because they're not short of pace either. But you'd imagine most teams won't be able to do that, what City did, so it's not too much of a worry. But that's how Bayern really got in behind City, and it's a good job for City that they didn't take their chances. As Akanji said himself, Bayern had lots of chances and they could have scored 3 or 4 if they'd have played a little bit better, which is obviously admittance that City themselves didn't defend the best, at least like they did in that first leg. But as I say, you need a bit of luck. City haven't had it in recent years, and maybe they've got it this time.
Yeah, I don't know if he's being a bit unfair on himself there, Akanji, because City could have scored a few more, and like Ederson, Bayern were missing a centre forward. But, it's a huge hypothetical to sort of say, oh, well, if they had Erling Haaland in the team, then they would have won, or something like that, because you can't just drop Erling Haaland into a team. Like, for me, it was kind of not validation, but like before the game, the most excitement that had come from like the Bayern reporters was about the return of Choupo-Moting. And you're always thinking, like, I don't watch Choupo-Moting every week, so I only really judge him from his Premier League days, and I'm thinking he's not the striker surely to strike fear into City hearts. And then by the end of the game, everyone's saying, oh no, well, if they didn't have Choupo-Moting up front, they would have done better. But that is the level that they're at. I thought City played very well, and like you say, I think it was the first sort of sign of Stones encountering problems with that kind of hybrid role. Ake got skinned, Akanji got skinned. There was room to say, oh, well, Real Madrid could look at this and see how to hurt City. But on the other hand, like, Real Madrid don't have the sheer pace that both Coman and Sané possess. And, with Musiala and Goretzka sort of laying balls on for them, they were so good. And sometimes you just have to give it to the opponents, I think, and say, yeah, you were really good. And Real Madrid are really good, but I'm not sure that they're really good in a way that is designed to hurt City as much as Bayern were. And yet, if Bayern had had, a Haaland or a Lewandowski up front, they would have been even more dangerous. And you'd expect Benzema to be a lot more dangerous than Choupo-Moting is, and Vinicius is so dangerous, obviously. But like I say, I'm not sure that just because Bayern cause specific problems for City, that Real will cause those exact same problems and automatically be better because they've got Benzema. So I thought City, City prepared for their opponents, and part of that preparation will be making sure that Bayern. I don't think Bayern had like amazing chances that they missed either. Sané had that one that he screwed wide where Ederson came out.
That was the one.
Ederson made a really good save in the second half, just seconds before City scored. But that wasn't like, it wasn't like they were missing open goals or headers from 6 yards or anything. So from that point of view, I still think City defended and played well.
It wasn't like City didn't play well at all. I don't think that's what I was trying to kind of get across. It's that they had to cope with the inevitable pressure that a team of Bayern Munich's quality
Yeah,
provides. And
yeah.
I think Bernardo Silva summed it up really well after the match. I don't know if you've seen his comments on BT Sport, but he was saying basically we've learned from our past mistakes in the Champions League. We used to always think we need to have the ball all the time. We always need to be in the attacking third to win. And it's like, no, we don't need to do that. We need to accept that we're going to have to defend and our backs are going to be against the wall. We need to accept that, not panic when it happens, paraphrasing that bit, and deal with it. And that's exactly what City did. It's not like they were bad. It's that they were under the cosh and they had to deal with it. On another day, they might have conceded, and it'd been interesting to see how they would have dealt with that. But they didn't. They got through and they weathered the storm. I say you need a bit of luck every now and then. Sane should have scored. How the ball, that pivotal moment when the ball trickles across the line and 14 seconds later Haaland scores. Another day that might trickle in and it changes. You never know. But that City just look more assured in themselves. They don't look, even when they were getting kind of ripped up at times and Coleman and Sane were having a lot of joy in the flanks, they never really looked that panicked, did they? It was kind of like, I think we said this in the first leg, they never looked panicked or worried. They were under heavy pressure and the backs were against the wall and they were struggling to get out at times. Again, had less possession in the match. But I'd like to see what City fans thought. Watching this, I'm sure there may be more panics. I'm sure Guardiola was as well. But it never felt watching that they were under immense pressure. And of course, they were 3-0 up and that helps. But it just never felt like they were going to. It never felt they were going to lose. I thought, and a big help of that was, of course, Ruben Diaz again, who was once again immense. This podcast is quickly becoming the Ruben Diaz kind of power hour because he's just been absolutely exceptional, and he was once again blocking it off the line, leading the side. There was one moment when he got caught in the ball again, which might be a little bit worry after he did that against Leicester, but otherwise he's just been absolutely sublime, hasn't he?
Yeah, and I mean Nathan Ake said similar to Bernardo said, maybe in the past they didn't want to defend or they didn't like it or they wanted the game to be perfect and played their way. And now, since 21 when they made the final, which was the season when Diaz came in, they've just like accepted and enjoyed that defence. And I think that stands true for last year. I think the Madrid semi-final was a bit of a just complete fluke rather than them sort of having this meltdown. But Diaz epitomises that spirit of enjoying the defence, the defensive aspects of the game and celebrating every victory. And it was like, even when they were 1-0 up on the night and like Haaland won a corner and he's absolutely screaming, he's roaring because he's won a corner. And that was kind of the attitude that got them through. Because we've pointed out it's weird because Bayern tore them apart like no one else can, but how can that still be a good performance? But it kind of reminded me of the Champions League tie with Liverpool a few years ago when City were the ones kicking off 3-0 down and then started with such ferocity in the second leg that they had Liverpool hanging on. And you think Liverpool really needs something to stop this momentum, and in the end they got it from a terrible refereeing call, and that allowed them to stabilise and win the game. Whereas City never had that. I mean they got a soft penalty.
We'll talk about refereeing calls.
Yeah, but then they missed it, and that only encouraged Bayern further. So City had to do something to stop it, and they did it themselves by scoring. So it was a really professional job, and again, I thought Diaz was the outstanding defender on the night. He was, probably the one that, suffered the least out of everyone. Partly because he was in the middle and Bayern's pace was on the out wide, but yeah, he was just everywhere he needed to be. Played tremendously again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and absolutely. And another player I think we need to kind of give some praise to once again is Ederson. I think we touched on this last week, but he came in for a lot of slack around the January, February time when City were floundering a bit, maybe a bit of a scapegoat, but maybe there was a bit of a point to some of the kind of overreaction. And I think especially on his one-on-ones, he's really kind of improved and really stepped it up there. In the last 4 games, City have kind of faced 3 one-on-ones. From top of my head anyway. Southampton won, Sulemana went through and he did have a dodgy touch, but Ederson was out at the right time to kind of get the ball away. A bit help there. But then against Leicester and then Bayern Munich, both times Madison at crucial points in the game where a goal could well have changed it out of City's favour. Maddison and Sane both went through. And each time Ederson, instead of what he usually tended to do was kind of charge out of his goal and just leave it completely exposed. He's been a lot more patient and restrained and shown discipline. He's waited for the player to approach him, gradually kind of made the angle harder. And both times the player hasn't scored when you'd probably bet them to have done so. Maddison hit his shot straight at him, and Sane hit his wide as Ederson came out to make his save at the last moment. And I think it's just, I think a lot of the complaints earlier this year were quite overblown, but maybe he's taken a bit of it to heart. Maybe Guardiola has, and I think it's quite clear he's worked on this bit of his game, and it's already paid off twice, if not 3 times for City, and it may well do again in the future. So I think he deserves big praise for
that. Yeah, rightly so. After this tie, his standing should be a lot higher with a lot more fans who were sort of spitting their dummies out earlier in the season. We didn't have replays in the press box, first world problems, but it wasn't clear from that Sane chance, especially because it happened so quickly. Like, was it a really bad miss, or was Ederson really good in coming out and closing the space down? And I think it was more good from Ederson than it was bad from Sane. I know Sane said afterwards he should have scored. He's got to score from there, but Ederson comes out so well that it does just close down any angle Sane has of a goal. So by rolling it past Ederson, he's rolled it wide because Ederson's successfully kind of covered all the goal. And yeah, I mean, save percentage is something he gets hammered for, so I don't put too much to that. But I think I saw he's got like the highest save percentage out of any goalkeeper in the Champions League now this season, which again, like, his role is not to make saves. He's not there first and foremost to make saves, but he showed that he can make them when needed, and that is a side that I don't think we've seen enough of in the last few years, and certainly this season. So he was he was really crucial in that respect, and then he was really crucial in slowing the game down from the start, which I'm not sure how successful a tactic it is if you get booked in the first half for doing it. But, it did set out City's stall that, from the first second, we are going to manage the hell out of this game. And if you, Bayern, keep trying to raise things, we're going to keep slowing it down.
Yeah, perfectly timed cramp as well. So a great performance all round from the goalkeeper. We'll bring part 1 to a close there, and we'll be back in just a moment to touch more talking points on the game and look forward to that thrilling semi-final with Real Madrid. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Talking City podcast. As I said, it was a kind of a thrilling game. Even though it was quite low scoring compared to the first leg, there was a lot going on, especially in that first half, which ended 0-0. I mean, Dayot Upamecano, I don't think a player has ever had a worse Champions League tie over 2 legs. The poor man, he was just... the one bit of luck he did have was when he did get sent off. Haaland was ruled off for offside, but what he was doing just... It was almost like a FIFA tackle when you're just bored, when you're 5-0 down and you just want to get the game kind of abandoned when you go down to 6 men. It was just a ridiculous challenge to make. He then somehow in the second half managed to give away a penalty for handball, even though his hands were behind his back, which takes some doing as well. And then maybe someone wants to give him a bit of a benefit of the doubt for that slip in the crucial goal, but I think at that point it's hard to. I think it was made to slip by Haaland's movement, got absolutely bodied, and then obviously City scored. It was not a good day, even though, to be fair, Guardiola did actually praise him in his post-match for saying he was breaking the lines so well. So maybe he did one thing right, but I don't think he'll be remembered for them contributions. And as I say, it was an interesting day for Haaland as well. He was made to wait to take his penalty and absolutely skied it, and maybe there was a bit of worry that it's one of those days for City, but not such the case. And a brilliant goal from City. As I say, Ederson makes a save, it rolls across the goal line, Stones hoofs it clear. Haaland brings it down to De Bruyne, and then De Bruyne, a beautiful pass for Haaland, who, as I said, leaves Upamecano on the floor once again, and then absolutely just whammies it in. So what a goal, and what I say, it was quite a mad game, really.
Yeah. I put it in my match report, but it definitely had vibes of when Messi left Boateng on the floor. In that Barcelona Bayern time. Messi did a
Just
bit
so
more to
hapless.
Boateng, to be fair, but yeah, and like Haaland a number of times this season has like completely bulldozed opponents. I don't think I've seen anyone more in control of kind of being bulldozed themselves than Haaland when he made sure Upamecano took him down to earn that red card that was then taken off because of offside. But yeah, he very much had his number. It was almost like man against boy, despite boy being over 6 foot. Um, yeah, it was end to end a lot of the time, and Bayern really attacked City, but then at times once they'd attacked, they were then happy for City to break, and City would suddenly have all this space in the middle of the park. That's how they won the penalty, and that's how they scored the goal. And Haaland, this mentality again, because he will have been absolutely tilting to have missed that penalty, and missed the chance to.
Enjoyed his celebrations.
Well,
Shushing the
so when,
crowd.
yeah, well, exactly. Like it was for him, it was for Dortmund probably, but he just again and again. How many times have we said it during a match that he's missed a big chance or missed a penalty or something, and then he's just stepped up and scored again. And when you do that, then nobody can be too bothered. Guardiola said afterwards that it was the sort of penalty that could have changed the tie, but City didn't let it and carried on, and it was Haaland who sort of made it right for them by putting that goal and absolutely blasting it past Sommo and
I know. From like 4 yards out. It was so funny. Just absolutely
yeah,
welled it.
just
I
like
find
this
it
is
quite
staying
funny.
in.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it was so funny. I find it quite funny with Haaland. Like, was it? It's just a little bit near my time. This like videotape my upbringing on football. But didn't
Yeah,
they used to say like about Andy Cole? Like he was obviously a great striker, but he needed like 3 chances to score one. And I do feel it's a little bit sometimes a kind of bit like that with Haaland. Like sometimes didn't he have the one when he went through a bit and he kind of hit it with his left foot, he snatched it and it went straight
yeah,
at Sommer.
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
like
yeah,
sometimes, and we've seen it a few times, he just needs like one or two to like warm up, and which is insane because he's got, what is it now, 48? Is it 40?
48,
48 I
yeah,
think he's on. And it's
yeah,
like, it's almost as if he could actually have even more if he started like all
yeah,
guns blazing from the off.
yeah. I mean, it was 1 in 5 with Cole, which was
Right.
wholly unfair, and the numbers will tell you that is an incredibly unfair take on Haaland because he scores like loads of his shots on target. But I understand
Mm,
completely what you mean. I think the shots on target that he does get must all be really promising opportunities because they're probably
mm.
all in the box, or something like that. But yeah, he does have this habit of for the best striker in the world by a country mile. He has missed some absolute sitters this season.
It's like the first one. It was like the header against Southampton, wasn't it? When he had it at the back
Yeah,
post.
yeah,
It's like the ones you think, oh, he's got this. He will just miss sometimes.
yeah,
It's almost like makes it more impressive that he's so strong mentally that he can just bounce back from those. And as you
yeah,
say, just score 48 goals in a single season, probably get to 60 by the time it's all said and done.
yeah. It was a really innocuous game and goal, so I don't think anyone will remember it. But it was when City played Southampton at home earlier in the season. They won 4-0. But like, I just remember tweeting like, "Yeah, it's not going to be Haaland's day. This is finally going to be the game he doesn't score because he'd like
I remember.
so many chances, and then 30 seconds later he'd scored, and it was like, yeah, that's Haaland all over that, really.
And I think he was then brought off, wasn't he? Literally just after he'd
Yeah,
scored. He's like,
yeah,
thank you, job done. I'll see you later. I'll see you later. But, as we
yeah,
touched on earlier, there was some interesting refereeing decisions. Both penalties were debatable. And the one that City conceded, which thankfully probably came too late, just by Bayern's late flurry, well, did come too late to change anything. But it was just a ridiculous decision, wasn't it? I mean, it comes off Akanji's own foot. His hand is just basically just where you put hands. And this absolute tripe, trying so hard not to swear, this rubbish about a hand being in a natural position. If your hand is connected to your body and isn't on the floor severed, then it is in a
yeah,
natural position. Otherwise, it cannot be in the position because you can't put your arm in an unnatural position because it wouldn't be natural.
Yeah.
It's baffling. It is baffling to me, and
See,
I think, I just don't get it.
again, I think because we didn't have replays, it was just like, what on earth has happened here? Like, they're
No
going
one
to
appealed for it.
VAR for what? And I think Akanji, because it came off his knee, I think, onto his hand.
Like bounced up.
And from such a close distance, and you're just like, that is never. I mean, the Upamecano one.
More understandable, actually.
I sort of, when he gave it, I was like, I think he's given a penalty, and people were like, no, he can't have done. And none of the City players were appealing. But then, yeah, I mean, when you watch it, like you say, Upamecano's got like two hands behind his back, but then as the ball goes past him, decides to stick an arm out, and you're like, yeah, I think that is a penalty under the current rules. I'm not sure everyone is happy with the current rules, or thinks that, like, the threshold should be that high for, like, if the ball hits your arm in the box, it's penalty. But I think that I don't have too many issues with that one, and especially with the way things are given. But I think the Akanji one was so ludicrous. I wouldn't expect that one to be given in the Premier League, for instance, because it was just so weird. Like, and you see, like, the well, we've been told why, for instance, like that Harry Maguire one at Nottingham Forest wasn't a penalty, and you think, well, if that wasn't a penalty, then there's no way that Akanji is being seen as a penalty in the Premier League. Like you say, it was just sort of fortunate for City that it didn't make too much difference. But I mean, Tuchel came out and absolutely hammered the referee afterwards, gave him like a grade E or an F, and also hammered the pitch, which it was fair because the pitch was really rubbish, like huge cutting up down the centre, which is sort of the only thing out of kilter really with the tie, because it was two fantastic clubs going at each other. So it deserved a better pitch than the game was played on. But yeah, I think the refereeing decisions, you just have to sort of, it's just pot luck, and you're like, will we get a good referee or not? Will they choose some crazy interpretation? Like, as I think the Premier League, you can generally agree, is like consistently below average, whereas the Champions League is such a mad spectrum where you never seem to get anyone good, but it's just varying degrees of how terrible they can be.
At least you can rest assured they won't be getting Lahoz in the semi-finals, since it's Real Madrid. So that's one kind of controversy avoided, at least. Yeah, I just think the handball rule, I don't really know what it is anymore, and it's just too harsh a punishment for the crime, isn't it?
Yeah,
an 80% chance of scoring after the ball flicks a hand at the goal line. It's a joke, but apparently there's talks going on today, UEFA Council and whatnot, discussing the handball rules. So we may we'll get a change, but I will not hold my breath. But we've got some more positives. One plus player I do want to praise, and is Jack Grealish. And it wasn't because he was like a live wire or setting up goals like he has done recently, but I thought he was quietly so crucial to what City were doing. You touched on earlier with Ederson how he slowed the game down and tried to take the stinger out of it, and Grealish was doing that on the pitch. I mean, we've waxed lyrical about how he wins free kicks, and it's just every time it's so inevitable. I think who was it? Talking about Ian Robin and Anthony having the one trick of kind of cutting inside and shooting. And it's like, it's a good trick, but it's only one trick, but you can't stop it, so it must be good. And Grealish just has the same. All he does is get the ball and just gets fouled all the time, but no one can stop fouling him. And he was just excellent at winning that ball and ticking down the seconds. And the one especially, it was just after the penalty where Bayern were trying to get a late flurry. City were a little wobbled after the goal. But it didn't stop until Grealish went, right, my turn now. He got the ball, a quick 1-2 of Alvarez, and then just dribbled around the whole right side of the pitch. He nutmegged one player, just went around him for fun, and eventually got hauled down just on the edge of the box. Was unfortunate not to get a penalty himself. It was so close, and I thought that was just absolutely excellent. He was brilliant all night, as was pretty much all the outfielders. But that bit of play is typical of his improvement for me and what he's bringing to the team now.
Yeah, and there's a clip as well. That clip where you can see Guardiola pointing to the corner flag and saying, take it to the corner.
And that's what he did.
And the Bayern players are expecting him to take it to the corner, and then he cuts inside and gets fouled on the edge of the box because, that they were all
Oh, I didn't
expecting
know that.
something else.
That's awesome. I know he took the ball to the
Yeah.
corner afterwards, didn't he, and just kept it there for ages. And there's a clip going around of him and Haaland doing it against Newcastle, I want to say. That's constantly doing the rounds because it's just the best time wasting ever. And he's just so good at it. And it brings such a lot of composure to City in those frantic moments.
But considering they had less of the ball than they normally would, as well, he is so good at keeping the ball, and they just knew whenever they could give it to him that he would keep it, take it higher up the pitch. There's this sort of idea of pausa that David Silva has, this control that he knows exactly the right tempo all the time, that Guardiola absolutely loves, that he's still kind of waiting for say Foden in the middle, and that De Bruyne even doesn't necessarily have, because he's more like going at 100 miles an hour all the time. Grealish, probably more than anyone in this squad, just knows when to accelerate, when to decelerate, how to ensure that City always retain the possession with the ball at their feet, and he showed that really, really well. And there was kind of shades last year in the quarter final with Atletico, where Grealish was obviously involved in all those shouting with Stefan Savic, etc. After riling them up, but it was another kind of performance where it was mostly Grealish with his head down, and Gundogan was getting involved in altercations, but Grealish wasn't so much. But it was just head down, doing a phenomenal job, which has really been the story of his season, especially since the World Cup.
Absolutely, and I say a great night for City, which has set up a semi-final date with Real Madrid. We'll touch on it more when the day finally arrives, side. But quickly, Akanji's described City as underdogs for this match, and they're a bit of a European kind of bogey tide for City. Of City's four semi-final defeats, two of them have come against Real Madrid, including last year's, of course. They are the reigning European champions. Despite the squad, the main players continuing to get older and older, they are still just the absolute juggernaut. I say maybe not having the pace of City have Bayern, but they certainly have the know-how, the grandeur and the quality with Kroos and Benzema, as you mentioned, and Modric, Vinicius, and defenders at the back. They're a juggernaut. They're going to take some stopping. It does feel, given an all-Milan semi-final on the other side of the draw, is thrilling, no doubt, but this feels like the final. And the question is, have City kind of learned from them defeats, and have they got the tools now to deal with Madrid? We've seen they've kind of matured in this competition with this two legs against Bayern. Is that what's going to get them through against Real Madrid this time?
I will tell you after the second leg.
Ooh.
No, it's hard to say whether they've learned the lessons until they've played them and they've been back in that situation again. I think it's different this year. I think City are in better form. I think they're a better team in this form. I don't think Real Madrid are as good as they were when they played at this stage of the season. I think it helps City that they're going to the Bernabeu first, so it's not like everything will be decided at the Bernabeu, because it still has this aura, and especially for City after last season, there may be a few traumatic memories still. But Guardiola said immediately after the game, there is this feeling now from everyone that you have to beat Real Madrid to win. And as much as either AC or Inter would be, have plenty of reason to worry against coming up against Manchester City in the final, I think AC or Inter would rather face City than face Madrid in the final, because Madrid just have this, like I say, this aura around them. They've been there and done it so many times, and everything that you would say about City in the Premier League against Arsenal, they've got this experience, they've been there, done it, etc., etc. You're saying for Real against City, because City really haven't been there and done it. And I think I would say that this 4-1 win over Bayern is City's best result in their Champions League history. I think that's better than beating Real over two legs when they did it in the last 16, better than beating PSG over two legs, or any result on the way to the final last year, because it is still a huge deal to beat a club as big as Bayern. I mean, you saw like Pep and the City hierarchy were straight to the dressing room at full time, and then they all went out on the pitch and had a picture taken of themselves celebrating this win in the stadium, because it was a huge deal to come away having won the tie. So if City can beat Madrid over two legs, that will be their best result and set them up for what they hope would be their first ever Champions League final victory. But Real is that big a deal. They will feel like beating Real is the big obstacle in their way.
Well, when you started saying on the put, then I thought he was going to finish that sentence saying something very different. But I'm sure City fans did enough of that for everyone, and I'm sure everyone will get involved if they get past Real Madrid. But before that semi-final, there is the small matter of the FA Cup semi-final at the weekend. So we'll end the part 2 there. We're back in just a moment to look at the upcoming game with Sheffield United. Don't go anywhere. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to part 3 of the Talking City podcast. A big game on Saturday side, a trip to Wembley where City will play Championship high flyers Sheffield United. There's concerns with both teams. City, of course, the one dark cloud cast over Wednesday's match, other than the literal dark clouds in the sky, was that Nathan Ake came off injured with what looked like to be a hamstring strain. We've not heard from Guardiola yet, so we don't know the full extent of the injury, but Ake himself actually said it quite optimistic, said it doesn't feel as bad as when I've had this before, so maybe there's some hope there, but the way he went down and immediately clutched for his hamstring isn't fuel optimism at all. It looks likely he'll miss the weekend and probably the big match of Arsenal coming up, whereas the Sheffield United are, of course, without their City lone duo of James McAtee and Tommy Doyle, there we go, got his name in the end there. City, of course, expected to win this, expected to win quite handily. De Bruyne has already said that, he's only won the FA Cup once. I wanted to win it again, so it's not like there's any shortage of motivation here for City, even after a big Champions League night. And you'd imagine quite a comfortable win. Is that how it'll play out?
That is how it should play out and how it looks on paper. And with all respect to Sheffield United, that City are a league above them.
Smash Burnley for 6, who are above Sheffield United.
Yeah, correct. The only thing I would say is we see the players every week after the game, as they walk on the way out. I don't think I can remember a time I saw them as shattered as they were as they came past us on Wednesday night. And we were speaking to Nathan Ake and said, was that like, how tough was that? And his eyes and his face said everything before he then went on to say, it was the toughest game of the season. To say they had a 3-0 lead, it did not feel like that at all. They basically spent 90 minutes having to run after Sane and Coman, which is enough to leave anyone broken, to be honest.
I'm tired of the thought of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I've not seen him as shattered as that, and that has to have an effect. And you add into that the last 30 minutes against Leicester were so bad when he'd taken everyone off that I'm not sure if players who played against Leicester have played themselves out of a start against Sheffield United, because say you were considering Calvin Phillips starting against Sheffield United, I'm not sure you would now, because he was that bad against Leicester, who a team who are 3 places above Sheffield United in the ladder. So Guardiola said it after Leicester, but he's going to have to rotate less than he probably thought. But that is a problem when the people who played against Bayern have been so knackered. They are used to playing every 3 days, but they're not used to what we saw from them against Bayern, because that has never happened to them all season. So it's going to be a real kind of it's going to be minds more than legs, I think, that gets them through Saturday. You know, I don't want to make out City are like underdogs against Sheffield United or anything like that, but it is just.
It's a turnaround.
Yeah, it's more knackering. It looks a tougher game today than it looked last Friday.
I think Guardiola himself complained that they had to play on Saturday because obviously United are in Europa League. He'd have rather played on the Sunday and have a longer rest time. Because haven't they made it, or are they making it so if you play on Wednesday, you don't have the early kickoff on Saturday, isn't it? So it's not the early kickoff, of course, but it's only it's only 4 hours difference. It's not exactly that helpful.
Yeah, it's I mean the difficult thing for City, or the good thing for City, is that they're in so many competitions that you can't really. You're gonna get these tight turnarounds between games. There's no real way of turning round. You know, they've got the first leg against Madrid on the Tuesday, and you know that at the minute they're playing Sunday and Sunday, so something's gonna have to switch for that. But there's no ideal solutions. You just have to go and go and go, and City will, because it's what they do, and they've got the players to do it. But I wonder if maybe Guardiola has after Leicester, he will have had certainly in mind certainly which players he wanted for Sheffield United. But after such a draining game against Bayern, when it you know, consider City had scored early or scored 2, or Bayern hadn't been as up for it, he would have been able to make 5 changes on Wednesday night and rest some real key players, whereas they had to go the whole time. You know, Haaland in the end asked to be taken off. He was that knackered. So there's going to be some real tired legs out there on Saturday.
All right, well, what changes do you kind of foresee, if any? We imagine it'll be Laporte in for Ake, as it was in Munich, and then maybe Phil Foden come in, or is that too soon? It seems like a good game to get his fitness back up after a few weeks recovering from appendicitis. Could it be an opportune moment to get him back in?
Yeah, I think it'll be an interesting marker for Foden, because he's kind of come back quicker than expected. So, I mean, ideally, you give him 60 minutes starting against Sheffield United and use that as a basis for could he start against Arsenal on Wednesday. But if he's still not quite there yet, you're probably looking at, say, 30 minutes off the bench, and then maybe a similar thing against Arsenal. You would expect Laporte to come in and Walker to come in, but as you say, because Ake's almost certainly missing the game, Laporte will be at left back, so you still need to play 2 centre backs. Walker probably starts. Mahrez, you would think, will come in, and I'd be tempted to start Alvarez and leave Haaland on the bench. What with Arsenal coming on Wednesday. You know, there's an argument that Haaland makes such a difference in the small time he's on the pitch that he could play the first half and still do it. But I think, you know, Alvarez has done well enough and wasn't one of the bigger culprits on Saturday against Leicester, so he maybe could earn a start over Haaland and keep Haaland wrapped up for Wednesday.
It's, of course, a massive game for City, as the treble, as we've touched on, is still a real possibility. And, you know, is it something City can do? I know you've had a little chat with Rodri this week, ahead of, quite a big chat. So there was loads of topics discussed. Great interview. Go and read it. But we give them a little sneak preview to our daily listeners. Like, what's the view in kind of the City camp about winning this treble, which would, of course, be historic, to say the least?
Yeah, well, you know, they're certainly not hiding from it. And Rodri put it very well in terms of, you know, to win all these competitions makes you a great team. And, you know, there's an argument in Liverpool that this Liverpool team under Klopp is a better team than the City team under Guardiola, that because they've won everything. They've won the Champions League. And, you know, many would not subscribe to that theory, but, you know, you can't argue that Liverpool, that Champions League does make a difference in how Liverpool is viewed. But, you know, Rodri makes the point that winning them all makes you great, but winning them all in one season, that is what really sets you apart and puts your name in history. And the United team from '99 are so revered still because no one else has been able to do it. It's really, really difficult to do, and I'm tempted to say it's never looked more on for City. That might be a bit of recency bias, but this shot in the FA Cup semi-final has usually been where they've fallen down in the past a lot, and you will be very surprised if they go out to Sheffield United. I think then it will just be about kind of containing expectations, because City have played Bayern and they've got Sheffield United in those competitions. You're like, they're a lot closer to the final, but there is still 8 Premier League games to go. On top of that, huge knockout tie with Real Madrid. So, Arsenal coming up makes it. If they lose to Arsenal on Wednesday night, then suddenly the Premier League will look a lot further away. So, and even if they do beat Arsenal, they're likely to be behind Arsenal until kind of the final week, just because of games in hand. So, it's still incredibly difficult, and there are still loads of pitfalls that mean it won't happen. But the fact that it can still happen is an amazing achievement, and the way this City team is playing, you would be silly to rule it out.
Absolutely, because it's certainly exciting times for City. But for now, dear listeners, that is the end of the latest episode of the Talking City podcast. Thank you all very much for listening. And if you want to watch this in living colour, of course, you can go over to our brand new YouTube channel, Manchester Evening News Manchester City. You're subscribing in droves, so please head on over, click that subscribe button, get us over to that magic 1,000 mark, and we'd be very appreciative of that. And of course, in the meantime, before the next episode of the Talking City podcast, you know where to go to keep up with all the latest City news, expert analysis, and match coverage from Wembley on Saturday. It is manchestereveningnews.co.uk/Manchester City. You can get us on Twitter at ManCityMen and Facebook Manchester Evening News -Manchester City. We'll be back early on next week to talk about the FA Cup semi-final, and of course that is finally here, that massive blockbuster, potentially title deciding clash with Arsenal. We all can't wait, and we'll be here next week to talk about it. But until then, thank you for listening. Ta-ra.